Pomp and circumstance as the president visits the Vatican. We're in Rome tonight with complete coverage. A group of Americans weren't far away for the president's visit. Reaction from a leader at America's seminary in Rome. Then, you can still call it a keyboard crusade. How the internet is bringing the pro-life fight worldwide. Those stories and much more just ahead on EWTN News Nightly for Thursday, March 27th, 2014. Thank you for joining us tonight. I'm Brian Patrick, in for Colleen Carroll Campbell. A historic day for the President of the United States and the Pope. They're meeting for the very first time today. Our Rome correspondent Alan Holdren starts our coverage. He was in the Vatican when the President and Pope Francis met. Alan, the President was really looking forward to this visit. How did it go?
Brian, we had two of the most powerful men on the planet here in the Vatican today. And their meeting was a chance, their first ever, to be together and to meet and speak in private.
The leader of the free world and the leader of the world's Catholics, together in the Vatican today.
Wonderful to meet you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
They met for nearly an hour. Long by normal standards, they spoke with the aid of interpreters. They didn't shy away from the thorny issues dividing Obama and Catholics right now in the U.S. Rights to religious freedom, life, and conscientious objection were discussed, as well as immigration reform. Other topics, peace in areas of conflict and human trafficking. And finally, gifts were exchanged. A box of seeds from the White House gardens for the newly opened pontifical villas at Castel Gandolfo. The president invites the Pope to see the White House gardens. The Pope responds with a genteel, "Why not?" in his native Spanish. 2 bronze medals from the Pope for Obama, and a copy of his encyclical on the joy of evangelizing. The president says it will give him strength and calm him down in moments of frustration. The Pope's response, in English this time, "I hope."
President Obama asked the Pope for prayers for him and his family, and as you may have seen, the encounter was fairly lighthearted, especially towards the end where they had a few laughs. This meeting comes at a time when President Obama's approval ratings back in the States are at a low. They're around 40%. Whereas Pope Francis' approval ratings are up around 80%. So you may say that the president could have been looking for a little bit of that popularity to rub off on him.
That's possible, Alan. We're hearing, though, a couple of different accounts about how the talks went. The president stressing common ground. The Vatican, though, highlighting sharp differences over abortion and birth control and health care. What are you hearing there?
Well, Brian, I mean, that's normally you have 2 different accounts. In the case where the U.S. wants to stress common ground, that also fits in with Pope Francis' idea of a culture of dialogue. They would have spoken about everything. The Vatican's accounts of this from the Vatican press office was that they did descend into details, and they talked about the right to life, to religious liberty, and to conscience. So we have the 2 different accounts. We can compare them, and we come up with the truth.
History being made today. Excellent coverage. Thank you, Alan. Also, with the president this morning in the Vatican, Secretary of State John Kerry. He met with his Vatican counterpart, Cardinal Pietro Parolin. Again, in this meeting, the Holy See expressed its concern, as well as that of American bishops, about the new health care law and a guarantee of religious freedom and conscientious objection. It's an honor to have Jim Nicholson joining us, former U.S. ambassador to the Holy See. He was in Rome from 2001 to 2005. Ambassador Nicholson is also the author of The United States and the Holy See, The Long Road. It's great to have you with us, Ambassador. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So the big question today is whether the Pope and the Vatican would bring up religious freedom and freedom of conscience. I want you to take a listen to what President Obama said at the recent National Prayer Breakfast.
Here as Americans, we affirm the freedoms endowed by our Creator. Among them, freedom of religion. Yes, this freedom safeguards religion, allowing us to flourish as one of the most religious countries on earth. But it works the other way too, because religion strengthens America.
So that was at the National Prayer Breakfast. Now Obama is meeting with Pope Francis. I wonder, do you think behind closed doors that the Pope maybe pushed President Obama a little bit on those things that he addressed?
I expect he did. I certainly hope that he did, and I think Pope Francis is the kind of guy who's convivial, congenial, but firm on doctrine, and this is extremely important to the church and the people of the church, so I suspect he did.
You were ambassador with George W. Bush. How many times did he visit the Vatican?
I was the ambassador the first term of President Bush, and he came to Rome 3 times to see Pope John Paul II.
So when a pope and a president get together like that, is it more polite diplomacy, or are there real issues discussed?
Both. There's a lot of politeness and protocol and courtesy, and when the president goes to the Vatican, it's a pretty splendid affair with the Swiss Guard and all the great art and porticos. But they then get kind of sequestered and have time just one-on-one with the interpreters if they need them, and that's when they talk turkey.
Everybody loves this pope. He's so congenial. He likes to kiss babies, but we know he can be tough. He got very tough on the president of Argentina when he was Archbishop in Buenos Aires on the same-sex marriage issue. Do you think there was any toughness in this conversation with President Obama?
Probably a good bit of firmness. I mean, knowing this pope as I think I know him from observing him from afar, he'd be very cordial and courteous, charitable, but I think firm on making the points of how important the freedom of religion and the freedom of one's conscience is, not just to the Catholic Church, but to Christianity. You know, Cardinal Burke, who's a member of the Roman Curia, an American cardinal, he said that this president is conducting an assault on Christianity in the civilized world, not just the United States.
Yeah, Cardinal Burke was probably a little more blunt than Pope Francis, but firm, yeah, I would bet. Ambassador Nicholson, thank you so much. We know you're a busy man. We appreciate you coming by.
Nice to be here. Thank you.
All right, of course, we'll never know exactly how that conversation went between President Obama and Pope Francis, but EWTN News Nightly caught up with a leader at the seminary where Americans study in Rome, close to the Vatican, and he ventured a guess.
I'm sure President Obama wanted to bring up issues of equality between men, women, the rich and the poor. I think that Pope Francis would have been very clear on the ethical issues such as abortion, such as the family, such as gay marriage, and what he has called a globalization of indifference, where we have to be very concerned about protecting human life.
American seminarians study at the Pontifical North American College, known in Rome as the NAC, where Monsignor Figueiredo is spiritual director. Well, later in the day, President Obama met with the Prime Minister of Italy, Matteo Renzi. He's Italy's youngest premier at age 39. Obama and Renzi had lunch and discussed a host of issues, according to media reports. Before he met Pope Francis, before he was president, before Harvard Law School, President Obama was a community organizer in Chicago. We caught up with someone who benefited from Obama's help decades ago.
I met Barack Obama in 1987 when he was hired by the Office for Black Catholics to train a delegation from Chicago that was going to the National Black Catholic Congress to prepare a national plan of evangelization for the African American community. And we wanted to make sure that Chicago's concerns were going to be prominent in that national plan. And Barack Obama was there to train us for lobbying techniques and so forth. And he did it very well.
Well, we told you earlier when we talked with Alan Holdren that Pope Francis's favorability is rising, according to a just released Gallup poll last April. It was at 58%. This year, it's gone up to 76%. And it is not just Catholics who are Francis fans. 78% of Protestants favor the Pope. 89% of Catholics say they like the pontiff. Coming up, we're learning more about a disease that affects millions, the new discovery about the roots of autism. Pope Francis is known for reaching out to others, the special group he plans to meet with for the first time since becoming Pope.
You're
watching EWTN News Nightly. Good evening. A unique move from the Diocese of New Ulm, that's in Minnesota. The church there is suing a diocese in Ireland. Officials in New Ulm say the church in Ireland allowed a priest who had been accused of abuse to transfer to Minnesota without saying anything about his past. Francis Xavier Markey died while awaiting trial on rape charges. Well, there is more trouble for the U.S. Secret Service this evening. We're learning about an incident in Miami. The Washington Post reports that 2 Secret Service snipers got into a car wreck during President Obama's trip to Miami earlier this month. The driver was suspected of drinking, but he did pass a sobriety test. In a separate incident that we told you about earlier this week, 3 Secret Service agents were sent home from the Netherlands this weekend after one was found drunk in a hotel. The chairman of the Senate Homeland Security Committee says he is, quote, troubled by the reports. Well, we have a new clue this evening about when autism first develops. It comes from a study published in today's New England Journal of Medicine. Researchers found that autistic children had disorganized brain cells in the areas that regulate social functioning, emotions, and communications, and at a much higher rate than their peers without autism. That leads some scientists to believe the brain defects that cause autism happen in the 2nd or 3rd trimester of pregnancy. This Saturday marks another first for Pope Francis's pontificate. The Holy Father is meeting exclusively with groups who are blind and or deaf. And our viewers who are deaf or hearing impaired can watch the closed captions at the bottom of your screen for this story. Wyatt Spencer joins us with more on the Pope's upcoming audience. Wyatt?
Brian, the Holy Father meets with all different kinds of organizations and church groups at the Vatican, but it's not very often that we hear about popes meeting with the blind or deaf. There are many Catholics who say this audience Saturday is very important because it highlights a hardworking ministry that's often overlooked. It's another busy day at the office for Lorraine Lynch-Ryan. As the coordinator for deaf ministry in the Archdiocese of Washington, she has lots of jobs. Her main job? Making sure Catholics who are deaf like her have access to church programs.
The biggest challenge for the deaf community to access the church is really their feeling of being oppressed, or that sense of isolation. Maybe they don't feel part of the community.
Growing up deaf, Lorraine says she felt that same sense of being alone in a church setting. She converted to Catholicism in the 90s thanks to help from interpreters.
So over time then, finally, the access to the Catholic Church with interpreters, I thought, whoa, this is very inspiring. I was able finally to understand what was being said and what was meant. I knew now what I was missing. With the Eucharist and what was happening, I felt a connection that I had never had before.
A sense of connection to the faith is the goal of Father Jerry Trancone.
In the name of the Father, and of the Son.
He's been working in the deaf ministry and St. Francis of Assisi Church for the Deaf for decades.
Liturgy with deaf people is an incredibly rewarding experience for a priest. It is actually sensing that they are receiving the message that you would like to be the channel from God to them.
Trancone says he feels encouraged by Pope Francis Saturday's audience. He says it provides inspiration to everyone working in their ministry.
It's just another indication of his carrying that charism out to reality, that God loves all people and all people are children of God.
Pope Francis is following in the tradition of his predecessor, Pope Emeritus Benedict. Back in 2008, Benedict was the first to meet with a deaf audience, but Brian, many hope the Pope will continue this tradition for years to come.
Well, knowing Pope Francis, I think he probably will.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Wyatt. A new ruling could change college sports as we know it. An official with the National Labor Relations Board says student athletes who receive scholarships are actually employees, meaning they can unionize. Football players at Northwestern University near Chicago were fighting for this ruling, but they need to wait before their touchdown celebration. The university plans to appeal. March Madness cranks into high gear tonight. It's the start of the Sweet 16. The first 8 teams will play tonight. Let's take a look at those games. First up, the Dayton Flyers and the Stanford Cardinals, 7:45 Eastern, then Baylor, Wisconsin. Later, number 1 Florida takes on UCLA, and Arizona versus SDSU is the late game starting at 10:17. Tony Burke, veteran sports journalist, joining us now to talk about the NCAA competition and everything that is March Madness. Tony, good to have you on to talk about basketball.
Oh, well, thanks for having me. This is probably the most exciting time of the year, right?
It is indeed. March Madness, they call it. When it gets down to the Sweet 16, it really gets exciting. Let's talk about some of the games tonight. Who do you like?
Well, I tell you what, the Dayton-Stanford matchup, well, you think those are two Cinderella teams, but they're not. Anybody who's been around Dayton, Ohio, like I have been, that is a basketball hotbed, and Stanford is Stanford. So I really like that matchup.
Isn't Dayton the only Catholic school still in the running?
So far, yeah.
And they're not even Jesuit.
They're not. No, they're not.
Marianist.
And they knocked off my Ohio State Buckeyes. So, but now I'm pulling for Dayton, of course.
What are the rest of the games tonight?
Florida and UCLA. Typical Florida, strong, big, physical defense. UCLA likes to score the ball and run it up and down the floor. So that'll be a good ball game. UCLA, ironically, has kids that are going to go in the first round of the NBA draft. Florida's just this senior-laden team that will.
Isn't Florida already the NBA?
Not yet. No. But you know what? Florida, actually, Coach Donovan has done a great job building that program, keeping the kids there. This is probably the best job he has ever done on a way to a Hall of Fame coaching career. So good luck to them. That should be a good ball game tonight, too.
All right. So who do you like to make it to the Final Four?
Well, I like Florida. I think Florida is the team to beat. I like them to play Michigan State, and it wouldn't surprise me at all if Michigan State beat them. Michigan State's healthy now. They weren't healthy all year. So I think those two. And on the other side of the bracket, Arizona taking on Louisville. And I think Louisville is so tough to beat. Like tonight, or when they play their Sweet 16 game, Coach Pitino's never lost in Sweet 16. He's 11-0. They're tough matchup for anybody.
In my home state of Kentucky, though, that is the rivalry. UK against Louisville, and you pick Louisville to take that and go to the Final Four.
And it wouldn't surprise me if Kentucky won too, because Kentucky is loaded. They just took a while to develop with these freshmen, and Coach Calipari just reloads every year. Which side of the fence do you lean on with the Louisville-Kentucky game?
I can't go either way because my daughter went to both schools.
Oh, okay.
She got her bachelor's degree at Kentucky and then her doctorate at Louisville. So I've got both hats.
You win either way,
I'll
and lose either way. Yeah.
Who do you like to come out at the very top when it's all said and done?
I think Florida ends up playing Louisville, which would be interesting because Pitino coached Coach Donovan at Providence, and I like Florida to beat Louisville in the final.
What is it about college basketball that just draws everybody into this?
I think, well, first of all, it's the large number of alumni around the country.
That's true.
You get right to your school. I think it also, too, there's so much excitement around every game, and I think the bottom line is it's the one-and-done factor. If you don't win that game, you're going home. And it happens to a lot of teams. Look at the Duke, Kansas, Ohio State. All those big schools are out because it just took one bad game or one bad minute or a shot that didn't go in. I think that's what mesmerizes the country around that is the finality of it all.
It is final, and it's very exciting. Tony Burke, thanks for joining us. We hope you have you back.
Oh, thank you very much.
All right. Well, decisions our leaders make in Washington, D.C. can have an impact across the world, but it's not all business all the time. Our Mark Irons has a story of a group of congressmen who aren't afraid to kick back.
March Madness may be in full swing, but the two teams behind me aren't competing for that championship trophy. Instead, they're fighting for a great cause.
The bottom line is we're all here out of concern for the homeless.
It's the 27th annual home court charity basketball game, pitting members of Congress on the Hills Angels against Georgetown Law faculty and staff, the Hoya Loyals.
It couldn't be more fun. It's a great event. We play hard, we play to win, but the real focus is on the charity.
That charity, the largest fundraiser for the Washington Legal Clinic for the Homeless, has raised more than $5 million over the years. The competition looks fierce, but does the final score really matter?
We have to win. This is deadly serious.
Senator Bob Casey of Pennsylvania can't play this year due to an injury.
I think I'm going to be kind of half coach, half like inspirational leader. At least that's what I'm hoping.
In the end, the Hills Angels pull off the victory. But the bigger win is the $600,000 raised this year for those who are less fortunate. Mark Irons, EWTN News Nightly.
Up next, a pro-life leader is reaching millions. On the other side of the break, we'll tell you what she's doing to stand up for what she believes. And the weekend is just one day away. We'll have a preview of what you can see at the box office. You're watching EWTN News Nightly. On this Thursday, March 27th, you're watching EWTN News Nightly. I'm Brian Patrick, and the world's leading abortion provider is set to honor House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi. Planned Parenthood will host the representative from California at their gala tonight in Washington and give her an award named after eugenicist Margaret Sanger, who founded Planned Parenthood. Meanwhile, another Washington area woman is getting an award of her own, this one for defending life. EWTN's Jason Calvi introduces us to this young woman who uses Facebook and Twitter to reach the world.
Over 1 million people saw this.
The power of social media and the fruit of Bethenny Goodman's work with the March for Life.
Here was just an amazing photo of an unborn baby smiling in the womb.
I really believe that so many people who don't know they're pro-life need to be convinced of that. So we have the opportunity to share the truth.
Bethenny runs the March's Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Pinterest accounts. She started here in August, but she's already winning pro-life honors.
Bethenny has built one of the most innovative digital and online efforts in the pro-life movement.
The Susan B. Anthony list gave their Young Leader Award to Bethenny and 3 others.
This prestigious award celebrates young leaders who are champions in the fight to protect the unborn in their communities.
I honestly did get tears in my eyes.
Bethenny credits her church and her parents as instrumental in her pro-life views. She previously was a congressional aide working on pro-life and other issues.
She also volunteers and counsels at a crisis pregnancy center. So she's living her values. She's an incredible example for young women to follow.
Bethenny's boss, March for Life President Jeannie Monahan, adds,
all of her work has surpassed my wildest imagination.
Bethenny coordinated a Twitter campaign leading to the march having 2 of the top Twitter trends on January 22nd. The march marches on, not just in January or just in Washington, but every day and every place.
Bit by bit, we really believe this can change the culture.
In Washington, Jason Calvi, EWTN News Nightly.
All right, thanks a lot, Jason. A big weekend at the box office, and Stephen Greydanus from Decent Films Guide and the National Catholic Register joining us to take a look at Noah. Stephen, Noah comes out tomorrow. You've seen it already. This is a story we're all familiar with. We've heard it from the time we were a child, the big flood. How does the movie present the story of Noah?
You know, one of the things I think that Darren Aronofsky wants to do in the film is to kind of take us out of that child's storybook version of the tale. We tell the story to our children because it has cute animals in it. It's got a pretty rainbow. The biblical story doesn't particularly focus on those things. It's more concerned with human sin and with God's judgment. Darren Aronofsky has been interested in this story for a long time. He wrote a poem about it when he was in 7th grade. And in bringing the first real big budget spectacle version of the story to the screen, he has both been faithful to the outline in Scripture and also significantly transformed it. This is a film from the director of Black Swan and The Wrestler. So it's going to be a divisive film, not a film that is for everybody certainly, but a provocative and interesting one.
The first big budget Bible-based film in many years.
Yeah, there hasn't really been a big studio epic Bible film in decades, probably since the 60s. The Passion of the Christ was independently produced by Mel Gibson, for instance.
Right. First of all, what do you like about Noah? And then we'll get into some of the controversy.
There are a lot of things that I like about it. I like the flashback that shows us the 6 days of creation, for instance, and the way that the Bible account of how the world was made and an account that you might see in a nature documentary on television dovetail without any sense of contradiction between them. I think the thing that I most like is the way in which the film really tries to create the sense of a world before the flood, so close to creation, in which mankind doesn't have the history with God, of God having called Abraham or brought his people out of Egypt. And so Noah is struggling to know God's will and do God's will, even when it's hard, and even when he sometimes misunderstands it, like the disciples sometimes misunderstood Jesus about what the Son of Man had to suffer and the kingdom of heaven and so forth.
Well, I find that intriguing. What about the problematic themes in this movie?
This is going to be a very controversial thing. There are things about the movie that I'm critical of, and there are things that other people are going to be critical of. I think one thing that's going to bother a lot of people are the environmental themes that have been added to the story. The movie shows how the Cain and his descendants create a civilization in which every kind of wickedness thrives, of violence, inhumanity, brutality, and piety against God, and also in addition to all of that, these people lay waste to the earth. So there's an environmentalist message that is not in the Bible story, and because that's a political theme, a lot of people are going to be bothered by that. Another thing is that there is a very dark family drama that's added that's also not in the Bible story. And because Noah is convinced at one point that God wants him to do something appalling, he almost becomes the antagonist, even though he is trying to follow God.
So it sounds like we can't recommend this one for everybody.
This is not a movie for everyone. Darren Aronofsky does not make movies for everyone. It's easy to assume this is a movie, it's based on the Bible, and it's the Noah story. We read it to our children, so I must be the target audience. I can't say that. This is a movie for, I think, mature, critical viewers who don't mind being challenged by a film and can appreciate some aspects of a film even if they disagree with other elements.
All right, Stephen Greydanus, we will read your review in the National Catholic Register. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you, Brian.
And thank you for joining us. That's all we have for tonight. Be sure to like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter. You can catch us anytime you like on EWTN's YouTube page. For all of us here at EWTN News Nightly, I'm Brian Patrick. Thank you for watching tonight. Good night and God bless you.